I don't know, he could have been like ex-KGB and had some incredible story to tell, or he may have just grown the, Bondi's biggest tomato.
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello. My name is Ellie Dodds and I am co-presenter, and today Jo's interviewing Louise Goss. Jo can't remember how she came across Louise's magazine, The Homeworker, but she is a fan, as you'll find out shortly. Louise is the founder of The Homeworker, a resource dedicated to helping people thrive when they work from home. Shortlisted for Launch of the Year by the British Society of Magazine Editors, it provides expert insights, tips and resources to help people achieve a happier, healthier and more productive work-from-home lifestyle. Louise is an award-winning journalist and mum of two. She's worked across a range of media from TV, radio, digital and print, and in regional, national and international newsrooms. Having worked from home for over a decade, she launched The Homeworker to help support and inspire people to make positive changes for a healthy mind, body and business. Back to the studio.
Today I'm interviewing Louise Goss of The Homeworker. Welcome Louise, thanks for joining me.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
So it's lovely to have you on the podcast. We did an interview a few months ago because I was in your magazine, and we were just laughing that we talked for ages.
Yeah, we did.
I'm really looking forward to this, for catching up again, although we had to be fair, it's taken us a while to start because we were catching up already. So start by telling us who you are, what you do, and crucially, where you do it.
So I am Louise Goss. I am the founder of The Homeworker, and that's a magazine and other resources as well for people who work from home. So it started a couple of years ago, so before everybody was having to work from home, and it's all about sort of supporting people, inspiring people really to help them make positive changes to improve their work and life and their work from home lifestyle. And it takes a very holistic view of home working, so covering mindset and productivity and business, but also the well-being aspect and your environment and your homework environment. And I have worked from home myself for well over 10 years now. So that's where I work. I'm based at home. I am here right now in my home office, but I live in the smallest county in England. So Rutland.
Oh, is that Rutland?
In Rutland, yes, in England, yes.
That's the general knowledge quiz answer if I ever heard one.
There you go, yeah.
So my husband's a sailor, so he goes up there every so often.
Oh yeah, Rutland Water is big reservoir, not too far from us at all, actually. It's really nice to go and have walks there and bike rides and that sort of thing.
Yeah, lovely. And The Homeworker is aimed at people who work from home regardless of the reason, and I don't mean the COVID reason, I mean as in it's people, not necessarily people who have their own business like we do. It's also people who work for a business and happen to work from home. Is that the
Yeah, I would say so. I think that there's a bit of a mix. Obviously, I would say that it is for anybody who works from home. So you self-employed, freelancers, small business owners. And then I suppose more recently, because of COVID, there have been a lot more remote workers, employees who've been interested. And I would say that the content's applicable to anybody really who works from home. And then there will be perhaps one or two articles that are a bit more specific to a business owner, and it may be around something to do with marketing or business or PR or something like that. And then there may be an article that's perhaps more relevant to a remote worker or a manager, leading a remote team and talking about remote leadership or HR or something like that. So there's a bit of a mix in there, but I would say the majority really is applicable to anybody who works from home, because we're talking about habits and routines and your work setup and your environment and the mindset, productivity tools and tips and those sorts of things, which are helpful to anybody really who's home based.
Yes, yeah. And where did this all come from? Because I don't imagine you planned to start a magazine for home workers when you were leaving your school career.
It wasn't on the radar. No, not when I left school. I left school and I did always want to go into media, interestingly. So I did languages, funny enough, at school, and at uni I then ended up going and doing a broadcast journalism qualification. That's what I went into initially, was radio and TV. And then I kind of made the move into print a bit later on, more after children, and because it was easier to do it from home and be flexible. And 24-hour news isn't that conducive to having a family and family life. So but the home worker itself came, I think the first seeds of it were planted a few years earlier, and we were living in Australia at the time. And it's quite a funny story, because actually when I think back, I was actually working, I helped to co-found a tech startup. So sort of very different to what I'm doing now. And as part of that, I was interviewing a lot of small business owners and just had my eyes open to how many people are working from home and doing this huge variety of really interesting things. And I thought it would be great. As a journalist, I love hearing people's stories and talking to people. And I thought it'd be really good just to start interviewing these people, profiling them, finding out about what they do and how they do it. And as that idea evolved, it sort of turned into how they navigate doing it from home. And then I sort of realized, having done it myself for quite a long time, all the different elements that really have to work together if you want to work from home successfully. And when we returned from Australia, I had two very young children, one just under 1, and the other one who was almost 3. And I was looking for something to do. And I thought, well, actually, I wanted to do something for myself. And so the idea, those sort of early starts of ideas that I'd had in my head, that came to fruition. I thought, well, why don't I start this and try it out? And a magazine just seemed like, as a journalist, it was something that I thought I could do, but also it was, I thought, a really good vehicle to kind of cover all these different topics and elements. So yeah, I launched it in 2019, before we all started working from home. Yeah. And it just had a really positive response to it. And I really enjoy doing it. And it's really interesting. I get to obviously talk to loads of different people and lots of different experts on these topics. And and so here we are, 2 years later now. And
so I'm intrigued in lots of different ways, but one of the questions I have is, my first business actually was publishing. I can't remember if I said to you before.
You did, yes.
So I published local magazines. So they were those little A5 full of advertising for local businesses, but had editorial and local community news and all that sort of stuff in there as well. And aspirationally, at one stage, I talked to a friend and said I'd love to do this for business. And there was one that was around at the time, which I really liked the format of and everything else, and it sort of inspired me. And I think we did maybe 2 editions. We certainly did one. I can't remember the cover of the second, so maybe we didn't even get to the second one. And then we just decided it was going to be too hard, because the local magazines we could just deliver locally. It was expensive to deliver, but it was a defined area and made sense. And then, people paid me advertising to do it, and that made the money and everything else. But I couldn't see how I was going to do it with the business one so well, because it would rely probably on postage and everything else. So that was like 15 years ago. And then you launched something like now, or 2 years ago, which was at a time where more and more stuff is online. And, some people would have said, online's the way to go, offline isn't. Look at Kindle and all that sort of stuff. And yet you've made it work. And I think one of the principles of what you do is about sort of lush quality, because I get your magazine online, but I also bought you do like
I do a hard copy, print version.
Yeah, and you do at the end of the year a sort of review copy type thing, don't you? There's been 2 of those, which I've got, and they're lovely. And I bought some for my members because they were so lovely. So tell me a bit about the model and how it's working in what would appear to be a challenging situation for what you do, but doesn't look to be, because you're doing it so well.
Well, thank you very much. It is interesting. I mean, because there's been a lot of talk as well about the death of print, and yet actually, if you look at it, it's quite a few independent magazines have actually started over the last, in the last sort of 5 to 10 years or so, and I think people still like that tangible, tactile quality of a magazine. So although the quarterly issue is digital, and that works because yes, people are online a lot more, and it's kind of easy, and it makes, certainly from a delivery point of view, that makes more sense. But I'm also somebody who really likes something in print, and I thought that, and the design, I suppose the design features and the quality of the design is something that I really enjoy as well, and I find really important. So I thought it would look so nice printed, that I decided I gauged it a bit, and I asked a few questions, and people, as soon as I posed the question, would you like to see this in print? It was pretty much a resounding yes from people. So I went ahead and did the first issue, so volume 1. And I think probably just as well because of the timing and the way, work was going, even pre-COVID, it was something that, it was something that was of interest to quite a lot of people. And so I was really lucky to start getting it distributed. So I obviously printed more copies, and then it goes through a distributor, and so it gets stocked in quite a few independent magazine stores. I was going to say around the UK, but actually it is global, because there are some stocked in the States as well, and it goes into some of the Barnes and Noble stores in America. So so that's how the print, I mean, obviously a lot of people do buy it directly through me on the website, and there is a postage cost involved in that, but I think people do expect to pay a little bit for postage, and because it's a magazine, it's not a huge amount. So it was
cool.
basically
such an amazing thing to send to my members. You had it wrapped in nice tissue paper sort of thing, and
that was one of the things that I mean, even when I first started, I knew that it was going to be digital primarily, for various reasons, but in my mind, I was like, I love the idea of doing this in print and actually sending it to people. And I really wanted this idea of almost people like receiving a gift in the post, like something really nice that wasn't just, wrapped in plastic and, you could see it straight away, but something that was of really nice quality and had a few little, bits in there like postcards and things, and then wrapped so that it felt like you were opening something special. And again, the feedback I've had from that is that people have really appreciated it, and they really enjoy receiving it. So it's really nice. It sort of ticks a lot of the boxes for me.
And I'm going to sound really sycophantic here, because I don't generally have magazines in real life. I have a big iPad, so I can read magazines really well on there. That's part of the reason why I got the 12.9 inch one, because it's like having the magazine in front of you sort of thing. But I've sorted out my office again recently, and I've of course got quite a lot of books, because I've got like hundreds of books on Kindle, but I've still got lots of books that I won't get rid of that are sort of on my bookcases and stuff. And then I've got your 2 annual things like propped in my little thing next to my armchair. They're the only things in there, and just like the books, I can't admit to reading them. I read them when I got them, but I don't.
Of course.
Them. I don't do anything with them other than have them there. but that's, that's fine, because it's just like the books in the room as well. So they are, effectively pride of place, because I don't have any
I
other.
love that. I love that. No, it's so nice. And as I say, I mean, it's, if I buy a magazine in the shop and I read it, I don't genuinely, well, yeah, no, I don't generally feel sort of compelled to go and email the editor and say, I've just read your magazine. And, I mean, I made it. It depends how.
Yes.
But I have to say, the number of sort of just emails and messages that I get from people just saying, this is fantastic. I love it, and that's so nice. I mean, it does make it worthwhile. And, and a few people have said it is one of those magazines that they like to keep and have just there, and they may flick through it now and again and use it as a bit of a reference. And I mean, that's music to my ears. I mean, that's so nice. It's, and all these, and it's very, they're unsolicited messages. And I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things that really just, when you do work hard, I mean, you appreciate having done your magazines. There's a lot of effort that goes into it. And luckily I enjoy it.
And again, at the risk of sounding like I'm really like, using you here, you do it so well. You interviewed me for, a page article in the magazine, and it was absolutely spot on. I think I suggested a couple of, words changed to clarify, and that was it. And it was me. It was like, we did spend a couple of hours on the
we did have a long chat, that one. Yes.
Exactly. We got a while and everything else, but your sort of skills of being able to distill what somebody's told you and tell a story is compelling, and it was actually me. It wasn't just some sort of generalized sort of review of what we discussed. It was great, really good. And so if that's the quality of what you're doing when you're interviewing people and you're turning those into the articles, you can see why people do enjoy it, and also people like me who've been part of it actually value in it as well, sort of thing. So
no, thank you. No, that means a lot. And I suppose as a journalist, it is one of those skills actually that you kind of just learn over years of doing it and interviewing people. And I think one of the key things for me is it's listening, actually, really listening. And it's one of the things why actually Zoom has been brilliant for me, because I will do a lot of the interviews via Zoom so that I am not scribbling all the time during the interview, and I can really pay attention and listen to what they're saying and then go back. And I think what I love about interviewing someone, particularly in person, if we can, is just getting that sense of that person. And and hopefully, as I say, one of those sort of skills as a journalist is then being able to put that into words and give people a real sense of the person, rather than just sort of like, this is what they do. And it's funny, actually. This takes me way back to a few years ago now. And I mentioned we were in Australia for a time. And one of the jobs that I did over there, when I was self-employed, was I ended up writing a book for somebody who basically advertised in a local sort of gazette in our local area, looking for somebody to write their story. And I thought, this sounds like a really interesting project. And so I met him and we had a chat. And honestly, at this point, I had no idea who this person was. And he could have had, I don't know, he could have been like ex-KGB and had some incredible story to tell, or he may have just grown the, Bondi's biggest tomato or something, and like wanted to share the news. So I was like, well, let's suss this out. And we got chatting, and he did have an interesting story. He'd grown up under Tito in communist Yugoslavia, and it was, his story was all about how he sort of grew up there in complete poverty, and then ended up sort of fleeing and hitchhiking across Europe, and then managing to get passage to Australia. So it was a really interesting story. But English was not his first language, although he spoke it pretty well. I think part of the reason he didn't want to write his own story was because he just wouldn't have been able to do that. And so through a series of interviews and meeting him and yeah, I had to get the essence of him and his family and his whole story, and even reimagine some of the dialogue that took place, obviously with his help, but he could not tell me word for word. So that was a really interesting project. And I think that's probably also helped in terms of, when it comes to writing profiles of people and interviewing, is just, really trying to understand what that person is, who that person is, and then getting that across. So that was
I'm feeling a sliding doors moment. You could have started a business ghostwriting people's life stories.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love writing. I actually love writing fiction, and I always have, and I, to this day, I think one day I will write that. And I actually do have on my hard drive a sort of a novel that is almost written. It's about 90,000 words. I mean, it's a decent length. And I keep saying one day I'll go back and I'll readdress it, and I'll go back and edit it, and like just maybe do something with it. Because I actually love the story, and I do want to do something with it. It's just finding the right moment.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I need to recommend some friends of mine, and I can't think what their website is, so I'm going to have to look it up. But it's Neil and Jen Bakewell. They help people to write for Kindle, and this is people from nowhere with no experience often as well. So you're obviously way further down the sort of journey with that. But I will check out their details and send them to you, and then we'll get them in the show notes as well. Because they're great people to just be connected with, and they know tons about all that sort of stuff. In fact, he has a sideline where he's Henry VIII, and he used to go into schools and be Henry VIII, teaching them about history and stuff.
Oh, amazing!
So I'll pass you those details. So tell us what your days are like. I mean, it's, as you say, it's time consuming doing something like this. Working with so many different people with so many different stories, and putting together such a good quality magazine. It's a ton of work, and you've got small children. How does that work? What do your days look like? How do you manage your time?
Goodness, it's quite. I knew obviously this sort of question was going to come up, and I was like, it's so interesting, because I remember really early on someone asking me this similar, and I still haven't developed a really good answer, which is not great. I really should have worked on it. But I think that, so I have a few things that I probably do. I mean, first of all, I have obviously, my career started as a journalist, so I am driven by deadlines, and that's just part and parcel of my life and how I work, and I need to put them in place, otherwise things don't always get done. So for me, that's kind of one thing that kind of forces my hand. Like, I know if something has to get done, and I know by when, it will always get done. And I'm also, and it comes, I suppose we're talking more time management here, because you're right, I do have young children, and they have, especially now things are a bit more open again after lockdown, loads of activities going on. And I mean, so suddenly life has become a lot busier. So I'm very sort of strict with sort of prioritizing what I do and what I'm working on. And I'm also a big fan in terms of time management of using time blocking. I actually wrote about time blocking in the latest issue of the magazine and put together a bit of a guide on it, because I find it a really useful tool for me to just keep me on track and keep me just focused on what I need to get done, rather than getting distracted. I think one of the things, especially these days, that stops people always being as productive as they might be, is that we are bombarded constantly with emails and social media, and there's so many possible distractions out there. So I'm quite disciplined around using my phone, checking emails and messages and that sort of thing. So I suppose little things like that just help me throughout the day to get everything done. And planning, I'm a big, I've always got a list, but I'm also, I'm always working ahead, obviously, the magazine comes out each quarter. So I kind of will already know perhaps 6 months in advance, what's going to be happening. And therefore I can sort of plan and set aside time to speak to the relevant people. I'm not saying that, a week before the magazine's due out, I'm not frantically scrabbling around going, oh my goodness, or something changes. Or, last year in 2020 is a case in point, because April 2020, there was an issue due out. March 2020, we all went into lockdown and everybody started working from home. And I was like, oh my goodness, I need to reflect this in our April issue. So it was, that was quite, that was quite a frantic time. But again, I think I'm fairly used to sort of, turning things around quite quickly. I've worked in newsrooms long enough, and 24-hour news in particular, you can really be under the pump sometimes to get things out, and also interviewing people like on the fly. Like I've had funny little stories that have happened to me where people have turned up, or I haven't been told, or it's been really last minute, and you just have to be across it and be able to interview them and then edit it and turn it around and get it out. And so as somebody like me who actually would struggle quite a lot with perfectionism, it's actually quite a good practice, because you can't spend too long going, oh my goodness, is this right? Is this perfect? I have to be accepting of it is what it is, and get it out. So yes, the quality is really important to me, and I do luckily have a proofreader who will check things over for me, because there's inevitably there'll be the odd little typo or something. But it's just a constant balance, and I don't always get it right, and sometimes my children will moan at me because I'm working again. And
that won't ever stop. I started my business to spend more time with my daughter, and she still complains.
No, exactly. Well, exactly. I mean, they are pretty good, and they do understand. And I will try and get the bulk of things done. Say, for instance, this interview, when I need some peace and quiet and not being constantly interrupted, although obviously my husband did at the very beginning. So I now have to worry more about my husband working from home than having children around. But no, I try and get, these sorts of jobs done in the day when they're at school. But I started the magazine when they were not at school, actually. And it was hard. It was just hard work. And sometimes there is no silver bullet or magic fix. And there are lots of things that we can do, time management things and little hacks and tweaks to our day that make things better and help us cope more. But sometimes it's just a case of it's hard work, and I just got to get on with it. And there were a few late nights involved, and that's the way it is. But it has got easier as I've got used to sort of doing it as as my children have grown up a little bit and are now at school. And we've moved house in the last 6 months as well, which has been brilliant, because I now have my own dedicated home office, which has made things a lot easier.
And I guess it's that whole sort of learning through repetition thing as well. You've done however many editions.
10 issues. The 10th issue came out.
So you talked about time blocking, and it's something that we've mentioned on the podcast before, and it's something that is quite topical. In fact, I'm sure I'm trying to think who it was. I think it was Productivityist Mike, I can't think what his surname is, was promoting an event, and it was like it was a 1 or 2 day event, and it might even have been 3 days, and it was all focused on time blocking. And I've always had this thing about, when you're creating content, how can you create all this content around stuff that seems so simple, that whole thing about when you know what you're doing, it's you can't think there's a lot of sophistication to teach somebody. But they managed to create a whole event out of the concept of time blocking. So you haven't got that much time, but how do you define it, and how do you?
It's funny, isn't it? Because for me, it's something that I have done. I thought about this, and I thought, well, I've definitely done it the way I do it now for, maybe a few years. But if I look back and I think back to, I remember really distinctly my GCSE year and my revision. And I think back and I had quite a lot going on. I was one of these children that did lots of things, and, I had friends, and I wasn't just always chained to my desk. But I did really well. And I just at school, and I think generally I was just quite organized. And one of the things looking back that I did with even just like my revision timetable was time blocking. And I smile to myself now because I'm like, I don't know what, as a 14, 15-year-old, I was literally, I scheduled out my day, and I put in a break for lunch, and I put in a break for a time block for a break. And I mean, I didn't have a smartphone distracting me back then, so perhaps things were a bit easier. But I just, there were little things that I did. I had a certain album that I just remember having on repeat. And I think back now as well, as like music, I find quite a useful tool sometimes as well to get me sort of in the mood and get going. And so, I think I've always sort of naturally done this. And then, but for me, it's all about just, it sounds very simple, but again, it's, if you're not used to doing it, it can seem perhaps like some mystic art to managing your time. But I always find this interesting with certain topics where people say, "Can you explain how you do it?" I think if you know how to do it, then it's easy. It's like a question's easy if you know the answer. But actually, you sort of, I think we underestimate sometimes, how our skills and our abilities and things that we can do that to other people are just not something that they're accustomed to. So for me, it's all about just looking at what it is that I've got to do in my day, and then blocking out chunks of time dedicated to that specific task. So, and try not to make those blocks of time too long, so that, because our brains obviously can't work optimally for much longer than about 90 minutes, I don't think. So I try to keep things, chunked to not too much longer than that. And then also block out time for things like checking emails, for instance, because that really stops me from just reacting to them as they come in. I mean, I get dozens and dozens of emails every day. And if I stopped doing my work every second an email popped up to look at it and reply to it, then I would literally get nothing done. And I would, it takes a bit of time if you're switching from one task to another to actually get into that flow of the next task. So I think time blocking for me is just useful because it goes, right, between this hour and this hour, I'm going to be focused on this. And it just really helps me to stay on track and stay focused, and not constantly switch between different tasks, not get distracted by notifications. But I'm also careful to sort of block out a time for a break, because otherwise it's very easy to just sort of do back-to-back work, and then you end up really flagging by the end of the day. And I think working from home, taking breaks is one of those things we do have to be quite disciplined about doing, because it's so easy to not get up and move and take a break, and we haven't got perhaps all the same reasons that we would have done in the office to move and get up and speak to people and pop to the photocopier or whatever it is that we might have had to do. So taking breaks is something that I'm very keen on.
Yes, yeah. I think one of the things I've sort of thought about recently with stuff is that some of the sort of more urgent stuff that needs to get done, like responding to some emails or sort of routine type stuff that's not really that important but does have to get done sort of thing, just ends up getting done anyway. So actually focusing on doing those things is a bit of a waste of your energy, because one way or the other they'll get done anyway. It's the focusing on the important stuff that is the hard thing, and that's the bit that we should be doing, I think, because the other stuff somehow.
And I think that's the other thing with a to-do list. I mean, obviously I've got I'm somebody who will, in the first instance, sort of just brain dump everything, and that might include certain emails or whatever that I have to write or reply to. But actually, when I come to just writing my to-do list for the day, I'm not going to bother writing every sort of email or something that I need to do. I mean, it's just the really important stuff, because like you say, those little things, if they're things that I'm going to get done in 5 or 10 minutes, I'm not going to add them to my list, or they may be included within a block of time, but they're I think that ends up really swamping your to-do list and actually making it a little bit overwhelming. It's quite satisfying to tick it all off.
Yes.
There is there's an element of like, oh well, I know I'm going to get that done, so I'll stick it there so I can just tick it off. But actually I what I'm do is I will be quite strict about maybe just focusing on, say, 3 things in my day that I need to get done. And even then those 3 things they might not all get done, but they're much more likely to get done, rather than if I'd stuck 10 things down and I'm like, oh my goodness, where do I even begin?
Yes.
I
think that's my problem. I've just rearranged yet again my Todoist setup, which makes me happy and makes me more organised every time I do it. But I realised today, when I was looking at the things that I'm supposed to have done around like audience building and stuff, that the list is so ridiculously long. There's no chance I was going to get it all done this week anyway. So why I do that, and instead of spending time discerning what I'm going to do, because in the end the only discerning I do is thinking whether I can be bothered to do that in the time I've got. And I pick the easiest thing rather than the most important thing.
Yeah, I think you almost need you have to plan in a way. You have to take that time to actually put together. I mean, for me I try and do that the night before, so I have quite a sort of just a little routine in the evening. It's not that strict, but just to make sure that I've got down, pretty much looking ahead to the next day, what it is that I need to get done, because then I'm not spending that time in the morning thinking, oh, what am I meant to be doing right now? Because it's all there and I can get going. And so that's something I'll do it in the morning, but I have quite a nice routine for the morning, and generally I like to just get going on that and then start work normally after the school run at the moment.
Yes, and all that's changed, hasn't it, over the past however long? I
mean, I like to get up a bit earlier, and sometimes I will do a bit of work before the school run. But I also like my mornings. They're quite precious to me, actually, in terms of just having that time for myself. So I generally will make sure I'm up before the children get up, and then I'll do yoga actually has become, I say new thing, but it's sort of certainly over the last few months something that's much more of a non-negotiable for me anymore. And I like to do some form of exercise, so I may go, like actually this morning I went for a run and did some yoga, but I'll always do some kind of stretching or yoga.
Do you use a particular yoga thing? Is there
I do I've just been doing them from YouTube and using so the yoga with Adrienne. She's obviously very well known. But she does some really good sort of like 30-day programs, and so I've followed like a couple of those, and that is just a really good way of just starting, because then you sort of every day there's like one a day, and it keeps you following that program, and then that gets you into the habit of doing it, and I love it, and find it really nice way to wake up.
The one I read in your magazine this month, the bar work, looks quite interesting, until you read the bit at the end where she says it just gets harder.
She did. She says it doesn't get easier. You just end up becoming, you just push yourself a bit more each time. But the bar, and I've actually done a bit of bar, and I actually did try one of her classes as well, because I wanted to, know what it was, know what it was about.
You're a method writer.
Yes, sometimes. But they are brilliant, and they are sort of really energizing. So I think, and there's I think particularly for women, where perhaps, running and sort of high impact exercise, it might not be suitable sometimes. So it's one of those ways of being able to get a really good sort of cardio workout in without damaging the joints. And also there's a lot of core stability work involved as well, which is good. And I think actually if you're sat at a desk for a lot of the day, that core stability work's really important actually for just your posture and not getting all the aches and pains in your neck and your shoulders. And
it was the picture as well that put me off. She looks far too fit and supple and everything else. So but for people listening, if you're interested, it's meetyouatthebar.com with bar spelt BARRE.
That's right. Her name's Jenny Brown, and she only started her sort of bar fitness workouts, I think, in 2019. But then obviously because of COVID, she sort of put lessons online, and people were obviously looking for a lot of home workouts. So it was really good to interview her actually, because and I like one of the things that she says, because you don't need all this equipment, but it is probably one of the best uses for an ironing board. To use your ironing board as a bar, because I tell you what, my ironing board doesn't get used for anything else. So.
Right. It's fine. So that's a plan. Lovely. So what about learning and improving yourself? How do you keep up? I mean, I don't even know. I'm asking you the amount of people you interview for the magazine. You don't have time to do anything else or need to.
I was going to say it's an education for me actually, just speaking to everyone I do, which is one way I can kind of improve and develop myself, because I've learned so much over the last few years, and with everyone I speak to really. I think that I do like listening to podcasts occasionally. I probably don't do it as much as I used to. We were chatting earlier, weren't we, about the Clubhouse app, and I think when I first started using Clubhouse, I was, like many people, quite addicted to it, and it was on all the time, and I was like, oh my goodness, and I was just sort of trying to suss it out and work out how I was going to use it. But now I quite like just dipping in and out, and there are some rooms that are real gems, and you can be quite enlightened by listening to some of the speakers, and then others can be a little bit hit and miss. So but I do like
rooms.
There's lots of
turning up, and all they're doing is like introducing each other and complimenting each other on their latest book and everything else before they even say anything useful, and by that time I've gone.
There are a few. I think if you can get some that are very heavily moderated, and it's just a little bit too much about the moderators, but there are occasionally you'll hear some really great guests talking. Self-development, I think for me it's all about kind of I kind of do a lot of the learning through creating the magazine and interviewing everyone I do, but then I like to listen to podcasts. I'll read books, although at the moment I will try and just switch off with like a fiction book rather than some more kind of learning. But there are some really great books out there, and what else do I like to do? I think for me, the sort of the self-development thing it's very holistic. I take a holistic view of everything. I take a holistic view of working from home, and I take a holistic view of sort of trying to get the balance right in all things. And I just think it's making sure everything's looked after. So I do a bit of self-development, but I think if I'm looking after myself with fitness and nutrition and sleep and all those sorts of things, which are so important, then I'm also doing what I can to keep me going and then sustaining myself.
Yes, it's interesting. Another thing, I was looking at the magazine before we came on, and there was an article about not using technology so much, which is a sort of an ongoing debate and conversation. I've interviewed somebody who sort of specialises on that too myself. But it was interesting that I was reflecting that we do we sometimes like vilify technology and say that it's causing all these issues and everything else. I started reading a book last night and I couldn't put it down, so I stayed awake for 2 hours longer than I'd planned. And I spent all morning reading it, and I finished the book about 10 o'clock this morning. And I was laughing then reading that article, thinking to myself, I agree on the one hand, but I also, on the other, think about, hundreds of years ago when, books came in compared to not having any and all that sort of stuff. They were seen as being an issue. There's all these sort of stories, aren't there, about, as things have changed, not just tech stuff in the past, that, things don't get accepted straight away and everything else. And I thought it's funny because we say that my friend's son is a big reader, and, you see him walking home from school reading his book as he walks up the road and things like that. He never gets in trouble for reading. But if he was on his device all the time, he would. And it's funny how, like with anything.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think it's funny because technology, it's essential nowadays to our working lives, to pretty much any aspect of life. I guess the difference is because yes, books are seen now as being very sort of wholesome and educational, whereas if you're on a device, yes, it's suddenly vilified. I guess the thing with the book is it's less distracting. I mean, I'm not an expert in how the technology works, but I do know that obviously looking at a screen, there's, you're being bombarded by a lot of different things there, and they become quite addictive. And I think it's that addictive nature of it that's the problem, and trying to find that balance really with using it, because obviously we have to, and we also need to teach our children how to use it, but having that healthy relationship with it, rather than letting it dictate our lives.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you're saying, that holistic thing. As I say, I wouldn't say wasted some time this morning reading my book, because it was enjoyable and I love reading and I feel like I've indulged myself, but there were things I should have been getting on with that I wasn't, because I was reading the book. So, but it is taking that bigger view, isn't it? And being happy that you're spending time on the things that you want to spend time on.
And again, I this word again, balance, but it's that balance between taking time for yourself and doing things that you enjoy and that really nurture you, versus sometimes you just have to be really disciplined and push yourself and go, right, I've got to get this done. So that's going away. And then, almost saving that as a little treat for afterwards, because I find that quite useful as well. Sometimes go, right, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to give myself that instant gratification. I'm going to save it, and when I've done this, then I'm going to allow myself to do that. And sometimes I'll do that even with tasks. Like there are certain parts, as with any job, that you really love and enjoy, and I could spend hours and hours doing it if I let myself, and then there'll be other things that I'm like, don't want to do so much, but if I save the treat tasks to the end, and then that's like my little reward for getting all the other stuff done. And I think that's one of those, you've probably come across it, the whole concept of Eat Your Frog, which is a book as well, but getting rid of that task you don't really want to do, or the thing that you procrastinate on all the time, getting that out of the way.
Definitely. It's funny, I recently relaunched the Engage for Success website, which is the National Movement for Employee Engagement, who I volunteer with, and I had to stop myself from reading any fiction during the week we were launching, because I knew that I would get distracted and I couldn't afford the time. So I had to so I was so excited when I finished and actually got it live, and normal life could restart. So I then picked up a book. So it was both taking away the distraction and a reward.
That's it. And I think that's quite nice. But
lovely. So last couple of questions. What about those days when you I was about to say when you get to live more. First, what about those days when it all goes horribly wrong? How do you get those?
And of course there are those days. They happen probably more frequently than I'd like. They happen, and I think I have perhaps got better at not beating myself up about it, and not letting it completely derail me, actually. So the morning may not get off to a great start, or something might happen that will take me off track, or I won't end up getting something finished that I was really hoping to do that day. And I can feel a bit disappointed by it. And I can sometimes, I do have a tendency sometimes to be a bit hard on myself, and I'll be like, oh, why didn't I do this? And but I have got better at just going, it happens, and I've just got to get on with it. And I can't, it's a pretty stoic attitude, I think, of just, there are certain things in your power to change and certain things that aren't. And so I try to just go with that, and, what's done is done, and I've just got to keep moving forward and try and make up time where I can, or readjust a few things, or just, change, be adaptable, be flexible. I think that's one of those things. But yeah, I mean, I think, and little things can happen in your day as well, not even just getting distracted or something not going right, but something could happen, like you get an email out of the blue and it might be like, oh my goodness, what's going on, and it can throw you a bit, or it might be, and I think, again, and this kind of comes back to this, why I'm so passionate really about making sure you're looking after the whole, because if you are mentally really stressed and really fraught, and you're not looking after yourself particularly well, then you're not going to cope with some of the things that do get thrown at you in your day, or things not going right. But I think if you've got some sort of good foundations in place, then you are in a much better position to cope with all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Great. And so last question, on those days when you get to live more, so that's where I talk about getting to do more of the things that you want to do and less of the stuff that you don't want to do, what do those days look like for you?
Well, I think it has been a day where I have done something for myself and for my business, and I can finish the day just feeling sort of accomplished, really. But generally it means that I've eaten well, I've exercised, I've made some plans, and actually, quite importantly, that I've discovered, particularly over lockdown, actually, is that I've talked to somebody and had a conversation, because I need that. Like, I'm quite an extrovert in character, and I like being around people. I mean, I'm not saying that I could be solidly on a Zoom call back to back, but I do enjoy talking to people. And I mean, I think I'm probably more what you'd call an ambivert, because I have some introverted tendencies, but I really do like socializing and being around people, and I've missed that, and I don't think I'd realized quite how much I had until we started to be allowed to mix with people again. And
garden ever since, have you?
Oh yeah, pretty much. It's been like, yeah, right, come round, yeah, I'm in the garden, barbecue's on, I know it's raining, who cares? It's but I think it could be a conversation like this, it could be, but it could just be, a phone call with a friend. But I will try and something like that in my day. I mean, obviously I can talk. My husband now works from home a bit more, so I sort of see him on and off. But I think something, it's not just a kind of brief chat in the kitchen while you're making a cup of tea or something, but it's more something quite meaningful.
Yeah.
And purposeful. And I get so much from that, and I get quite energized from that. So that's something that is quite important for me to have done in my day as well.
Lovely. As expected, it's been brilliant talking to you, Louise, and we've gone on for ages. I'll do a shorter outro on this one. Tell people how they can find out more about you and get in contact.
So the best way is the website, which is thehomeworker.com. I'm also on Instagram at thehomeworkermag, and actually I'm on LinkedIn as well, which is Louise Goss on LinkedIn.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been great to speak to you.
Stop feeling stuck and overwhelmed. Join Power to Live More Calm membership today and make an investment in your future. The Power to Live More Calm membership is designed for coaches and consultants struggling with the pressures of running a home-based business. You get access to our supportive community, including weekly Zoom calls, accountability, learning materials teaching you online marketing, audience building, income generation, and all sorts of other things you need to run your home-based business with ease, along with materials like templates, checklists, and planners to keep you motivated, organised, and productive. To learn more about the Power to Live More Calm membership program and apply, visit powertolivemore.com/getcalm.
All this information is available in the show notes. If you go to your app that you're listening to this on, you'll be able to see them there, or you can go to powertolivemore.com/ in this case 218, and you'll find them there. This week I want to talk to you about Essentialism, which is a book by Greg McKeown, and it's the topic that we spoke about at the Members Gold Call on Monday. It's quite pertinent for me this week because I'm actually away in my caravan camping off-grid, and so there's limited solar power because it's quite cloudy for half of the day, so the battery's not being topped up until the second half of the day, and charging a laptop and various phones for the children and so on takes away from that, so I have to be quite careful in managing power. And also the internet isn't very good. I used to use E, but I'm currently using Vodafone, and in this particular field it's not quite as good as the E was. So what that's doing is it's forcing me to work out what the most important things are that I need to do, and just getting on and doing those, and not sort of faffing around getting distracted doing other stuff that isn't essential for this week. So it was interesting that I'd picked that book as the topic for the week as part of our Simplify theme for the month, but hadn't really thought about the fact that I'd be in the caravan at the same time. The book talks about 4 main principles, and these really are the sort of the as principles are the things to think about when you're thinking about essentialism in your own life. So the first one is about do less but do it better. That whole thing about don't keep focusing or not focusing, trying to focus on many different things, because that of course doesn't work. That isn't focus. So thinking about just really picking the really important stuff and working on doing that the best you can and dropping everything else. Second one is about rejecting the notion that we should accomplish everything. And I think the more we're in this sort of digital age where we have everything at our fingertips, information and the ability to do things, there's a real tendency to keep adding tasks to our list rather than doing the opposite, which is what Greg's suggesting. The third one is constantly question yourself and update your plans accordingly. And we talked at the call about how often we have these great ideas and sort of simplify what we're doing, and time goes on and we sort of add more things back in. And I was saying I often look at my calendar and realise that I've just added a load of meetings or a load of stuff in there that wasn't in there a few weeks ago, but I've just sort of said yes to things that perhaps I should have said no to. And so it's really important to have a regular review process of your projects and the things that you're working on and the things that you're doing and the people that you're spending time with and so on, so that you can make sure that you are really picking those things that are most important to you and those people that are most important to you. And the fourth one is waste no time ensuring that the changes are put in place. So if you do that plan, you realise that you've got some issues, work out how you're going to make a difference to that and put that back to how you want it to be. And that takes us back to the topic that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, which is about saying no, because that's something that often we have a problem with and don't really realise we've got that problem until we do that review and realise that we've got loads of stuff on our plate that we didn't intend. We also talked, particularly from my experience this week, about how amazing it is how much we can get done when we've got very little time and a deadline. When push comes to shove, that sort of thing about you're going on holiday and you manage to get done more in the last 3 hours of the day than you did in the last 3 weeks sort of thing. I might be slightly exaggerating there. But the question really then is, how can we create an environment, i.e. a short period of focused time on a regular basis to get done what we need to do to be most productive and most essential, because we know that works and it does happen that way, but how can we carve out that time? And that's one of the things that we do within the Power to Live More Calm Gold membership. We have Get It Done sessions every week. It's literally just 2 hours where we all get together
and plan to do something specific individually, and we each hold each other accountable, and we constantly sort of smile about how simple the process is. It just involves us getting together, saying what we're going to do, going off and doing it, coming back and sort of updating halfway through, and then coming back at the end of the 2 hours to confirm how much we've achieved. And we're always really amazed how much we've managed to achieve in 2 hours, and also sort of amazed probably as well in how we can't seem to find those 2 hours elsewhere in the week. So how can you do that? How can you find that time for you to focus on that thing that you really need to do without distractions to get that stuff done? So, and making sure that it's the right stuff, the essential stuff. And then just to finish, one of Greg's suggestions is to ensure that you're always saying I choose to rather than I have to. And that's when you know that you're following that essential path, that you're doing the things you choose to do rather than the things that you have to because other people have told you to do them, or because you've said yes to something that you didn't want to say yes to. So that's, I think, a really good mantra to build into what you're doing, making sure that it's a choice, not an obligation or something that's just sort of crept up on you because you've not handled it well enough to sort of bat it away. So that's the book Essentialism. I would really recommend it. It's something I read quite a while ago. I've gone back and looked at it this week using the brilliant app Blinkist, which gives you a summary of books. So I was able to pick up the key points from that to help with our discussions. So I'd recommend the book Essentialism by Greg McKeown, and I'd also recommend Blinkist as an app if you want to get the sort of key points of business books without necessarily needing to spend all the time reading them, or certainly not reading all of them. You can just read the ones that you really want to read once you've picked up the key points from them. Again, the show notes for this week's show are at powertolivemore.com/218, and we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Use your power to live more.